In this low-code feature focus, we'll talk about how to use Plantinap to build workflows that you can use to test the results of other workflows. With these techniques, you'll understand how to build tests that can validate your workflows are performing as designed. I invite you to look into the description of this video to see the related video, Testing Workflows, that was part of a recent low-code cafe. The link will take you right to the part of the video where we talk about testing workflows. As a quick introduction, I built a math demo workflow. It's a workflow that takes inputs and outputs and does some work. So if I do 5 and add 4, it'll give us the result of 9. What we'll cover in the rest of this demo is the way to build a QA test workflow that will test the results of math demo and make sure that it's returning correct, known, good results. We'll be testing our math demo workflow, which is a simple workflow that has 3 inputs, number 1, operand, number 2, and 1 output, the result, and the set of process steps that does either add, subtract, multiply, or divide on the 2 numbers to provide a result. Again, we're using this simply to illustrate that the workflow has inputs and outputs and has a guaranteed result that we can test. So I built a math demo QA test job, and we'll go ahead and edit that. We'll look at this complete workflow to understand exactly how it tests the math demo workflow and returns a failure count that can be used to determine whether an additional investigation is necessary. So let's take a look at exactly how this workflow is built and what we're going to get out of it. First of all, it has no inputs. This job is just going to run and provide 2 outputs. One is a fail count, the number of failures that the workflow detected, and fail detail, something that will tell the user which test to look at that failed. In our process, we start and initialize, and the initialization action sets the fail count to 0 and the fail detail to blank. This is going to be the default return of the job. No failures and no detail reported. Following that, we have actions that occur in sets of 2. There's a test where we actually try testing to run the workflow. So this is called addition test 1. And we just provide 3 values, 501, add, and 525, and tell it where to put the result, which is in the context variable result. The second action in the pair checks the result. It says if the result is anything other than 526, it's going to increase the fail count by doing math, adding 1 to the fail count, and it's going to adjust the fail detail to add identification information to the fail detail. So it will contain the original fail detail plus math demo QA test, addition test 1. So we're telling it exactly what workflow and what test has failed. This pattern is repeated again in sets of 2. You can test the workflow with as many cases as you need to make sure that all of the various cases are validated. So for example, in our subtraction test, we take the number 501, subtract 101, and we store that in a result. We'll be expecting an answer of 400, so in the check, we will activate if we get any result other than 400. So if the result is not equal to 400, we increase the fail count and say that subtract test 1 has failed. This is repeated for multiplication test, a second multiplication test, and a division test. Let's take a look at our division test. We take 81, divide by 9, and we store that in a result. And of course, we're expecting the result of 9. If the result is anything other than 9, then the fail count gets incremented and the divide test fails. Let's add another divide test just to more thoroughly test the divide action. What I'm going to do is to export these 2 items just so we can make a copy of them. So we'll copy those and import them back into the workflow. We'll add these. Into the workflow. So now we're going to be executing our math demo, and this is going to be called divide test 2. So in this case, we will take 1,000, divide it by 20, which should give us the result of 50. So in our testing, we'll say that we're going to do the check test 2, that's the name of the step. And if the result is not equal to 50, then we'll increment the fail count and say that it didn't pass divide test 2. Depending on the complexity of your original workflow, you may have to add multiple variables and test lots of different possibilities, and the check might require that you test the various output results. In my case, I only had one output, but you might have multiple, so you might have to add additional tests to test all the results that come out of your workflow. So now we save this, and we can run it and see it says the fail count is 0, fail detail is blank. In our test, we've provided test cases that passed. If we make a mistake on our test cases, or if we change the workflow and have incorrect output, our job is going to catch that. So let's take a look at what that would look like. If we intentionally disturb our math demo and change the divide action to add 1 to the result, this is going to actually give a bad division result. Our QA test job is going to detect that. So we run the QA test job, and we run it, and we find that we get 2 failures. The math QA test divide test 1 and the divide test 2 both failed. When a test fails, it's either that the test was designed incorrectly or the workflow is not performing as you would expect. That can happen, for example, if you edit it or if other conditions change within the system and the result is different than it was originally. That QA test will point you to the workflow that's having a problem, and you can decide whether the test or the workflow needs to be corrected. I'm going to remove the error in my workflow. So that covers the QA test job. I've added another job called all QA test, and the intention here is that we would run all of the various QA test workflows to validate that all of our various workflows are working as designed. One test will return the result as to whether there's any problems within that are detected by our QA testing system. Let's run that now. Again, there are no parameters, and it returns the same 2 items, divide test 1 and divide test 2. Let's fix our math demo to remove the intentional error that we added earlier. We edit the divide, remove the +1, and save. Now we run our all QA test, and there are 0 total failure counts. As our final step here, we'll take a look at how the all QA test is designed so that you can see how to set this up on your system. Again, this job has no inputs, and it has 2 outputs, a total fail count and a total fail detail. When we look at the processing, it has an initialize step, which just sets the total fail count to 0 and the total fail detail to blank. Again, these happen in pairs. We execute our math demo QA test, and we capture the 2 output fields, the fail count and the fail detail. And in our next action, we accumulate the total failures. So the total fail count does a math expression to add the fail count to it. So it starts at 0. If there are no errors, it'll continue to be 0. And so at the end, we'll get a total count of failures across all tests. The total fail detail is just the words of what has failed. So we take the original total fail detail, which is blank, and add on any messages that are returned by the QA test workflow. You could add as many pairs of these as you want to test a variety of workflows, so this will allow you to isolate the tests for an individual workflow and then to bring them all together in one all QA test. Again, we run that, and we find that we have no errors. This workflow has passed all of our tests. As a final thought, you could use automation to run the all QA test workflow once a day or once an hour, whatever is necessary, and it would return a total fail count. If the total fail count is 0, then your workflows are running as intended and you have no problems. If a problem were to creep in due to an edit or a changing condition on your system, the automation could email the failure information to you or a system administrator for review. In this low-code feature focus, we've talked about workflow quality assurance, how to test and how to build workflows that do tests for you. Is there some feature you'd like to see in our next video? Leave a comment in the section below. For more great low-code content, be sure to subscribe to Plankton App.